TUF session. It's amazed me over the past 2 decades how the relationship between TUF and BAUS has emerged. Not infrequently we get requests at BAUS to fund various bits of activity, and as an association we've never really been in a position to do so, and what we do is we point them right towards TUF, and TUF have actually been incredibly supportive of bringing urology to the fore and issues related to urology to the fore in relation to the public. So I was delighted to see the cyclists come in on Monday, having raised in excess of 60,000. Later this year, there's the TUF Atlantic Challenge, where we're hoping to raise a lot of money for TUF, which in turn will go to fund lots of activities from which we'll ultimately benefit. So I'd like to ask Louise de Winter, Chief Executive, to come to the stage and to formally introduce Roger, who tells me that this is his 36th BAUS, and he's threatening, I hear, that this may finally be his last lecture. I somehow doubt it. Louise.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Kieran, and good morning, everybody. Before I do introduce Roger, our next speaker, I would like to, this is the point at which we award the Urology Foundation Medal for the Best Research Scholarship application submitted in 2018. And the winning entry is for a project that will evaluate new image-based screening tests for the clinically significant prostate cancer in men in the community, and with the aim of finding a suitable test which might in future be offered as an alternative to PSA screening. And the award goes to David Eldred Evans, an academic clinical research fellow at Imperial College, for his project, the Prostagram Trial, a prospective cross-sectional study assessing the feasibility of novel imaging techniques to screen for prostate cancer. David, would you please come up and accept your award?
David. Very good.
Congratulations, David.
Let's do. There we go. We got.
It's always out here.
Thanks, David. Well, I mean, our speaker this year is known to many of us and needs little formal introduction. He is a leading luminary in the urology world and a very renowned prostate cancer surgeon. He has always been ready to trial new techniques and practices, and is an avid champion of urology trainees and urology research, not least through his significant fundraising and support for the work of TUF and all that we exist to represent and do. Beyond that, he has long recognized that patient safety and excellence in care and the art of being a good doctor and surgeon is not just gained through technical skills alone, but by being a good communicator and listener. He has therefore championed education courses which emphasize the importance of communication and leadership qualities, so crucial in delivering good care and good treatment to patients. As he prepares for his retirement from clinical practice later this year, all of us at the Urology Foundation are extremely proud to call him our president. So, speaking to us about a life loving the prostate, I'd like to introduce Professor Roger Kirby.
Well, thank you, Louise, and thank you, BAUS. Yes, my 36th BAUS. I think I've got 36 BAUS bags in a cupboard, which maybe I'll be able to use for a good purpose when I retire. So I've got about 25 minutes to talk you through a journey through my prostate as a prostate cancer surgeon. There are 7 themes that I'm going to try and whistle through. Some light-hearted stuff, some more serious messages. So influences and absent friends, prostates and my operation, avoiding error and litigation. We've had some fantastic sessions this morning from David Sellu. and from Portsmouth. Men's health, resilience, emotional intelligence, and we're going to finish up with the Urology Foundation. So these are some of my heroes: Henry Thompson, Terence Millen, John Blandy, TW, Patrick Walsh, and Manny Menon. I like that expression, standing on the shoulders of giants, because me, like Tom and Nicholas, who I can see in the audience there, had the benefit of some fantastic training 30 years ago in London. So Terence Millen, retropubic prostatectomy. I love the story of him operating on a patient in retention and getting that patient to stand up at the RSM and actually pee into a bucket, demonstrating a magnificent stream, like a policeman's horse in front of everybody. John Blandy taught me how to do TURP. Richard Turner Warwick, not only urethroplasty but open prostatectomy. Jeff Chisholm, I think's magnificent contribution was really getting Gleason scoring for prostate cancer accepted in the UK. Dr. Walsh taught me how to do a radical prostatectomy, and Manny Menon had the brilliant idea of switching to robotic prostatectomy. So here's Henry Thompson. He worked just down the road from the prostate centre in Wimpole Street. He was famous for having octave dinners of the great and the good, including the King and the Prime Minister and influential people. And he also was interested, like me, in fundraising. Terence Millen, as I mentioned, the open prostatectomy changed people's lives by making them catheter-free. And it's his celebration of his contribution, setting up the Royal Society of Medicine Urology section 100 years ago, which we'll be celebrating in 2 years from now. John Blandy's contributions, well known to everybody. He's a fantastic writer and a fantastic illustrator of his own books, and he taught me a lot about writing and urology, and especially TURP. TW, who's now 94 years of age and living in the West Country, still pontificating in his inimitable way. Fantastic mentor of mine at the Middlesex Hospital. Here he is serving the Christmas turkey with Janie Costa, his favourite sister on the ward, many years ago. And there's Dr. Walsh with his famous operation and his discovery of nerve sparing, which influenced urology so much all over the world. And Manny Menon, who had the brilliant idea of using the Da Vinci robot to achieve radical prostatectomy. And although it's tough to get the evidence together to actually prove that robotic prostatectomy is better than open prostatectomy, I can tell you, having done about 2,000, more than 2,000 of each, robotic prostatectomy is so much better for the patient, so much better for the surgeon. The number of calls you get in the middle of the night from blocked catheters, etc., just absolutely plummeted as soon as you learn how to use the robot properly. So some sadly missed colleagues. I know that many of you will know many of these people. Poor Malcolm Cotcote died so young from a cardiomyopathy, was found dead in bed by his wife. Tim Christmas there also died prematurely on board that boat when we sailed across from Southampton to BAUS in Jersey in the 1980s. There's Tim Christmas with Bill Henry. You'll notice that Bill Henry's shoes are nice and clean, and Tim's were scruffy, as they always used to be, wearing his John Lennon glasses. Bill Henry was one of my mentors at Barts when I was a consultant, along with Hugh Whitfield. And when he retired, he went to one of the Scottish Western Isles, and sadly had a heart attack and died at age 72, partly because there was no coronary care unit on the Isle of Lewis, and it took too long to transfer him to Glasgow. John Wickham died just a few months ago. I was at his Thanksgiving at Barts just a few weeks ago. Fantastic contributor. And I think looking back now, it's probably John Wickham's contribution of all the urologists, all the famous urologists that I've just mentioned. John Wickham's contribution introducing percutaneous surgery that probably is the most influential worldwide of all his peers. Here's dear John Anderson on his motorcycle that he bought after he was diagnosed with metastatic prostate cancer. He sent me this slide of his liver with metastases in it, and it was unbelievable, the bravery with which he accepted the fact that he was never able to take up his position of president of BAUS because of this diagnosis. John Fitzpatrick, my dear friend, died prematurely from age 66 from subarachnoid hemorrhage after using his exercise machine too vigorously back home. This is the last photograph ever taken of John Fitzpatrick at the Vintners Hall. It was a TUF event, actually, and John with a glass of champagne in his hand, as usual. I still miss John very badly. And this is Dr. Studderford, who died just a couple of weeks ago. His obituary appeared in the Times last week. Dr. Tom was a great advocate of red wine as a curative for most ills, and I certainly subscribe to that view. But he was also a great advocate of PSA testing in the days when there was a massive reaction against PSA. There still is, actually, to some extent in some quarters. So moving on, one of the things I'm maybe most proud about is starting this journal, Prostate Cancer and Prostate Diseases. It's now its 20th anniversary, and I just saw this morning that its impact factor had gone to 4.0. And it shows you how long it takes before a journal it becomes established. And the Journal of Clinical Urology, which is doing so well at the moment, it just has to be patient because it takes so long to establish a journal. Well, one of the things that's really changed urology, apart from the robot, which I'll come on to in a minute, is the use of 3T MRI. And I'm proud that it's British urology that's really established this. And for a change, we're ahead of the Americans in this respect. The protocol from Mark Emberton and Caroline's group at UCL of using MRI ahead of biopsy has absolutely transformed the experience for patients and us as clinicians, and it's reduced markedly the number of small, insignificant cancers that are picked up that have to be managed by active surveillance, and I think that's a major benefit. But we still need to separate the dangerous tumours from the pussycats that can be managed by active surveillance, and I think molecular technology is going to help us as well as MRI. That's a DNA molecule merrily rotating. And the tests like Prolaris test and the Oncotype DX test, which at the moment are rather expensive and rather cumbersome to get, I think I would predict over the next few years we're going to be seeing more molecular testing to tell us which patients should be categorized for active treatment against non-active treatment. Well, this is my prostate biopsy because when I came back from Patagonia, having cycled 4 TUF across the Andes, at the very top of the mountain, somebody said, "Roger, you look as sick as a parrot. You look as though you're going to die. You better get a cardiac check," which I did. My heart turned out to be all right, but whilst I was in the MRI scan, I said, well, you may as well scan the prostate because I love MRIs of prostates. And there was a little tumour just sitting there, so I didn't really hesitate too much. I decided to have it removed surgically. This is me on the operating table with Sister Chewy and Krishna Patel, who seem to think my operation is a massive joke. And this is the dream team that whipped out my prostate for me, Prokar, Krishna, and Ben Chalakam. And that's my prostate sitting nicely on a little swab there. I think they took away the left neurovascular bundle. I can see it just glistening there. But there's the tumour. You can see it on the slides there, and it was contained. It was 5 years ago. My PSA remains undetectable, so I think I've dodged the bullet. And having been somebody who's taken out a lot of prostates and then had his own taken out, I think that is a big advantage because the patients say to me, "Doc, what would you do?" And I said, "Well, I tell you what I did. I got rid of it, and here I am I'm living proof that you can have your prostate whipped out and still able to give a tough lecture 5 years ago." Well, one of the interesting things about that operation is we had a journalist in the operating theatre, a guy called Simon Garfield, fantastic writer, he's written about 7 different books, all of which are very good. And then he wrote this article which was published in the Observer Colour Supplement about a delicate operation, and there's old Prokar looking slightly wistful and me standing beside him with the operating theatre. We also wrote about our experiences in Trends magazine, which is one of my favourite occupations, editing that. And it was a tale of 4 prostates, and I don't know whether you can read the 4 urologists there, 2 of whom have passed away from metastatic prostate cancer, and 2 have dodged the bullet, me and Damien Green. So it shows, people say prostate cancer is a toothless tiger and you can live with it rather than die from it. With good evidence in urology, there's a 50% mortality, so that is scary. Well, coming back to robot surgery, this is a slide I borrowed from PS, where he showed it at a recent meeting. The adoption of robotics in the UK is extremely good. Nearly 100% of prostates are done robotically. I think it just proves the fact that if you believe something works, then it works because people take it up. There are other techniques such as HIFU where the take-up rate is much, much lower. So I think that's evidence. We need, of course, trials to confirm that. But the common sense evidence is that anything that's adopted to that extent has to be the best way to do it. Of course, there are new robots in the pipeline. I won't go into all the different ones there, but you know, the future is robotics in surgery, and urology, as usual, is in the forefront, and British urology, as usual, is clearly in the forefront. Well, something else that's I think is very hot is PMSA PET-CT scanning. We use it a lot at the prostate center. We love this test. Here's lymph node metastases shown up on a PMSA PET-CT. Here are bone metastases on a PMSA PET-CT, which picks up soft tissue mets from prostate cancer as well as bone metastases. And there's a very exciting development. We've sent a couple of patients, actually two rather ardent TUF supporters, to Germany for treatment with PMSA, which is linked to lutetium, and it's a kind of clever way of actually treating just the metastases. You can see here that the normal distribution of PMSA in the body, in the salivary glands and in the prostate, as well as the kidneys. So if you link in, you can use it diagnostically to pick up metastases. There's some metastases rotating in a patient. And you can also tag on a radionuclide beta emitter, which is lutetium, and there's a patient, the same patient actually, having been treated where the metastases have almost disappeared. So it's experimental at the moment. We were talking about it in the symposium last night. There's no good clinical evidence yet that it's going to work, but I think it's one of the most exciting possible developments in the future, a smart way of treating metastases. This is a patient who's had 4 courses of lutetium. Each time his PSA is dropped, and the 2 patients that we're sending across to Germany show similar responses. Well, this is just a little video clip of me some years ago, and it's a kind of salutary tale, really. Can you turn the volume up?
Our very special guest today is Roger Kirby. He's a consultant urologist at St. Bartholomew's, and it's a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you, Kevin.
And he's going to talk to us about a very common disease, I understand. This is the prostate.
Prostate, yes. And we've treated this always with surgery. In fact, there's a new drug which is in development at the moment that may transform the prospects for people with this disease in the future.
So what is it called?
The drug is called Proscar.
Proscar. Now, sitting next to you is Kevin Delaney. He's a reporter for WXYZ TV. And Kevin, you have the first question.
Yeah, Mr. Kirby, or is it Dr. Kirby? I'm sorry, whichever
it's
it is. Mr. Kirby, I'd like to establish your credentials first. How much, you've been involved with Merck on this new drug testing, is that correct?
Correct.
How much compensation are you getting from Merck, and how for your involvement in this?
Yeah.
Do you come at this impartially, or are you on their payroll?
Yes. No, we're very strict that I'm not on their payroll. I have no personal reimbursement from for my work.
Well,
what is in it for you from Merck to go on?
He took a trip to Munich, and he spent some time in a luxury hotel in Munich.
that didn't count, I suppose.
No, I think that that was a scientific meeting. We were discussing the pros and cons.
So there's no other compensation other than nice fat trips.
You don't think you compromise your position at all in kind of pushing this new drug that they're working on, do you?
No, I don't think so. I think
You're very excited about it.
I'm excited about it, and we feel that if this drug works, and we're working objectively to prove that it does, that it will be of real benefit to patients.
In essence, doctor, they're guinea pigs, right?
To some extent, you have to try a drug, but if we do it in a controlled way...
Has anything unusual happened to any of those people who are taking that thing?
No. We've seen very few side effects with this drug.
Well, what's the worst you've seen, would you say?
We had one individual on the drug who developed a rash. That was the worst that we've seen,
Where was the rash?
Did he live, or...?
Yeah, he survived, and
I see.
we stopped the tablet and the rash disappeared.
Oh, I see. That's the worst you've had only?
That's the worst.
Where was the rash?
It was all over his body.
All over?
Yeah.
Oh, my
He
God.
still has it?
No,
it's gone
disappeared
away.
now. It's gone now.
As soon as you stopped taking the drug, it went away,
Yeah.
so something's wrong
But that's-
there.
That was one patient.
One out of how many?
Thousands of patients. Thousands
I
of people have been treated.
I'll move on, but you have to be careful when you're being interviewed, as my daughter found out on the Graham Norton show a couple of weeks ago. So there are problems, there are challenges. You know, there's the NHS litigation time bomb with current claims valued at £60 billion. And there are companies like this law firm advertising to help patients sue us for the mistakes we make and for bad outcomes. And the truth is, everybody makes mistakes. Even the Prime Minister makes mistakes. That's her set falling apart during the Conservative Party conference. And I've made mistakes of my own. And in urology, I think we'll all remember the case where the wrong kidney was removed. And of course, there's lots of lessons that can be learned. And John Reynard's working now with a pilot called Peter Stevenson to learn the lessons from the aviation industry to avoid mistakes. This is one of my mistakes, actually, in robotic surgery. This patient developed a cecal infarction where, as a result of the tilt on the operating table, when we untilted the patient, the cecum had flopped backwards and became ischemic. So I had to get the general surgeons to come in and do an emergency right hemicolectomy to help me. So I think there's some lessons to be learned from mistakes. Everybody has mistakes, everybody has complications. I've actually been sued twice, and I've been reported to the GMC twice, and it goes with the territory. It is very upsetting when it happens, but you do need resilience, you need common sense to deal with it. So when things go wrong, there's a number of rules there. I'm not going to read them all out. I think apologizing for the error often can be a way of stopping litigation. The writing scrupulous notes is absolutely essential, and it's best to write them before the mistake happens rather than afterwards, because the lawyers just take you apart if you haven't documented things clearly. So these are the 7 deadly sins of surgery. I'm not going to go through them all. Hubris, arrogance, and anger. I do hear stories in London of surgeons getting really angry with patients and angry with the staff, and I think that's extremely unprofessional. Time management, last-minute changes of plans, and of course now with the Confidentiality Act and the potential fines from that is a problem. So one of my other interests is men's health. I'm just going to whiz through these slides so I don't finish too late. Some unhealthy habits of men. This is a good example of the sort of problems that men can run into. This guy's not a urologist, but he could be. Come on, England in the World Cup. Okay, a little bit more about men's health. Well, this is Michelangelo's David, and this is the modern Michelangelo's David as a result of all those American fast foods. We can blame the America for the size of our burgers, but we don't actually have to eat them. This is the metabolic syndrome. And we came up in an Italian restaurant actually in Wimbledon with my friend Cully Carson, of this idea of getting to a better place, listed there of the 5 key things to do to try and lose weight, which I try and do, but not always successful. Fully there. Lose the booze would be a really good one, I think, but it's a tough assignment. Well, cardiovascular disease is linked to urology. This is a coronary artery that is blocked by atheroma. This is a coronary artery with a thrombosis in it. My own father died from a myocardial infarction age 49 when I was still at school, which I think is one of the reasons why I got so interested in men's health. But also, you know, I was involved in the development and marketing of Viagra, which is a fantastic discovery in the middle of my career in urology, which changed patients' expectations. But I think we've got to remember that erectile dysfunction is linked to coronary artery disease by endothelial dysfunction, and actually that ED word also stands for early death, so it's something to bear in mind. So I think urologists ought to be men's health doctors in the way that gynecologists are women's health doctors, and we ought to think beyond the prostate to the rest of the patient and think about those things that are listed there. So what about being a team leader? There's some things there. We've got a new president of BAUS, who needs to be our team leader, but we're all team leaders within our own units. And there are a few words to pick out there. Respect, not just for your colleagues, but for everybody that you work with, leads to loyalty and trust. And I like that last statement. Change without leadership is impossible. Leadership without change is irrelevant. So if you're going to be a leader, you're going to have to think about some sorts of change, but they have to be the right change. Well, these are the 5 components of emotional intelligence. Maybe self-regulation would be the one I'd pick out there, because I think to be a successful surgeon, to kind of get through your career without being ending up in some kind of disaster zone, then you have to regulate yourself carefully. And my advice to you after 36 years of urology is never lose your temper, always stay in control. You need these other attributes, including keeping a steady nerve, and that really is the same thing as resilience, I suppose. So just to finish off with some quick pictures, these are some of the more memorable fundraising challenges that we've done for PC UK as well as for TUF. I started running marathons back in the year 2000. We then climbed up Kilimanjaro, and I nearly died of mountain sickness at the top. It was Chris who saved my life by giving me a dose of massive doses of dexamethasone at the top of Kilimanjaro. And there's my pals, including Roger Plale and John Fitzpatrick and Mike Bailey there at the bottom of the mountain, having survived. The guy in the middle there is Sir Harry Solomon. He's just helped us get a £12 million donation for King Edward VII Hospital. And that's Sir Marcus Setchell, who gave birth to Prince George, the future King of England, so he's pretty famous. And this is us at the bottom of, in Nepal. You can see the donkey in front of Roger Plale is looking rather nervous. I don't really know why that should be. This is us cycling in the first of the cycle rides in Sicily. Then we went to South Africa, Malawi, Madagascar. There's dear old Peter Rimington, who wore that T-shirt prophetically, because when he got home, he ended up having a heart attack and having a stent put in his left anterior descending branch, the widowmaker artery. There's Louise in the middle there, because Louise is amazing. She's come cycling with us, and she's just as tough as the CEO of TUF ought to be. These are the urologists last year, having at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, having cycled through Vietnam and across the Mekong Delta. We've done fundraising with Steve Norris, who was our fantastic chairman of TUF, helped us raise loads of money with Fitzpatrick. We've had some help from some celebrities. I tried to get Andrew Lloyd Webber, after we took his prostate out, to write an opera called The Phantom of the Prostate, but he refused to do that. There's Stephen Fry, who Ben Chalicum operated on recently. I've stopped doing robotic surgery now, so to use World Cup terminology, I do the assist. I see the patient, set them all up, send the patients across, and then Ben just nods them into goal, like John Stones did against Tunisia recently. There's my dad and my mum. There's my wife and my little daughter, who's now quite famous. That's my boy Joe. There's Vanessa in The Crown, which has really put her on the map. She won that BAFTA award a few weeks ago, made quite a nice speech, and that's Juliet, my youngest. So resilience, you need to be resilient to be a surgeon, and you really need it. This is one of my favorite sayings from Scipio Africanus, who conquered the Carthaginian Empire on behalf of the Roman Empire. Our minds control our hearts, just as we're never downhearted by failure or complications. We are not puffed up by success either, and that's a good message. This is Winston Churchill's message: success is not final, failure is not fatal, it's the courage that continue that counts. So we've got some things coming up, so you can come trekking in Ethiopia to raise money for TUF. You can cycle in Costa Rica with Louise and Peter and the team in 2019. The Atlantic Seamen already had a mention. These guys are rowing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic, 2 hours on rowing, 2 hours rest, 2 hours on, going right across the Atlantic, and they've already raised about £60,000. We need to get to 100,000, so your help would be amazing. These are the brave guys that cycled. I think it was Roger Plale's idea, but the two Bens that organised it, Ben Eddy and Ben Chalicum, outside raising £60,000, as has already been mentioned. This is Ben having got to the top of the steepest hill in England, 30% gradient. Ben looks a bit red around the face, I suppose, at the top of that. So I'd like to say thank you to TUF, to Louise, to BAUS, to all of you guys who I've just had such a fantastic journey through my career, and I've loved urology, and I've loved everybody that I've had the privilege and pleasure to work with. So thank all of you.
Thank you very much, Roger. And as ever, your talk was both interesting and entertaining. And while I'm here, I'd just like to add a couple of thanks of my own too, if I may, please. Again, they've already been mentioned, but I would like to thank Ben Eddy and Ben Chalakum for and all the team who cycled in the Bike for TUF from Scarborough to Liverpool. You know, I think this is the 4th year you've done it, and every year it gets bigger and better. So thank you very much for that, and you know, do join them. They seem to have quite a lot of fun on those rides. Again, the Atlantic Seamen, they've been mentioned a few times, but they are doing an incredible thing. They are rowing over 3,000 miles unaided across the Atlantic, and they're doing that to raise money for urology. I mean, TUF is the charity that benefits, but actually everybody in this room benefits if they can make it over the line and we can help them meet their goals. So please come and see what you can do to support the team. It's all to the benefit of urology. And, you know, we have got a stand here, and you still can come and have a go and have a row if you think you're tough enough. So do come and take a look and learn a little bit more about what we might be able to do for all of you in terms of supporting urology development, research, and your professional development as well. And finally, I would like to thank BAUS, and I would like to thank Kieran and Duncan, the incoming president. We work very closely with BAUS. We like the BAUS team, and I think it's a very good relationship, and long may it continue. Thank you very much, everybody.